Today's guest will share her experience buying, building, and developing wine businesses. Currently the Chief Financial Officer of Far Niente Wines, which also owns the Nickel & Nickel, Bella Union, and EnRoute wine labels. She's a savvy wine businesswoman with big plans for the future. Welcome to Uncorked, an insider's look at the wine industry from the lawyers of Farella, Braun, and Martel. I'm Catherine Philippakis, head of the firm's wine industry practice. Each episode, my colleagues and I bring you the latest insights from California's wine industry and beyond. We open a favorite bottle and settle in for a chat about all things grape to glass. From our offices in the Napa Valley and in San Francisco, we invite you to uncork a bottle and join us. I'm Catherine Philippakis, and today's guest on Uncorked is my longtime client and friend, Dana Sexton Vivier, who's currently the CFO of Far Niente Wine Estate. Before we start talking about what's happening in the world of Far Niente, Dana, tell us what wine we've uncorked today.
Hi, Kay. This is our 2018 Bella Union Napa Valley Cabernet. I'm so excited to be sharing this wine with you, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Great. Well, let me have a sip before we get started. Very nice. While we sip, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to the wine world?
Okay, I just want to laugh for a second. I wish we could be looking at each other. It's disconcerting that my camera doesn't work. I'm sorry about that.
I know.
But although...
Did you appreciate your wine in the Moroccan tea glass too, by the way?
Yeah, totally. I was saying to Rachel and Cheryl earlier, I don't actually... Kay didn't actually get the one. We don't actually, if we're not recording video, I don't actually have to open this bottle that's sitting right here with me. So, so it's got a cork, a quarter of the way out of it. Okay. Here we go. So, tell us a little about your background and what brought you to the wine.
I said Washington, France, moved to Napa.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, I grew up in Los Angeles and I ended up at school during a time. Wait, let me start that over. Sorry. I grew up in Los Angeles and I was fortunate to attend the French high school of Los Angeles. And there I learned how to speak French and developed a passion for it. I really I was halfway decent at picking up the foreign language, and I really appreciated it and liked it and started just learning about all things French. My parents weren't French. They didn't speak any foreign languages, and my family didn't really have any background there. And so it was a little bit of an anomaly for me to do that, which made it extra fun. Then when it was time for me to go to college, I looked at the East Coast, looked at the West Coast, and decided to stay closer to my family on the West Coast, and elected to go to Whitman College, which is a little tiny liberal arts school in Southeast Washington State in a little tiny town called Walla Walla, Washington. And lo and behold, Walla Walla was just at the beginning of a huge wine explosion. There were 13 wineries in that town when I arrived there. And by the time I left, I think, there was 100 or something. And it just so happened, that I had learned how to speak French. And so when it came time to study abroad from college, I elected to go live in Paris. I had a great time. I got to know some friends, some of whom had wineries. And I thought, man, this is fun. You can make a living in this business. I got to figure this out. So came back to Walla Walla to finish up college. And by that time was old enough, had turned 21. And so I could work in the local wine bars and, get to know the local winemakers, and had a pretty good time in the industry. But I always sort of knew that if I wanted to do it for real, I needed to come to Napa. So after I left Walla Walla, I applied to business school at UC Davis, thinking that could be my shoe into Napa. And lo and behold, it worked. Amazingly. Sometimes these things work out.
So did you move originally to Napa, or did you live in Davis first?
I lived in Davis when I went to business school. Mm-hmm. I finished business school in April and moved to Davis in May. Or actually, I think I started my job on April 6th, like the day after. I graduated from business school a quarter early and had a job and went for it.
And what was your first job in the wine business?
Amazingly enough, I sort of landed this job, which I felt like I was an N of one. It was the intersection of high finance and the wine business. There was a company called Premier Pacific Vineyards, which was started by two guys, Dick Wallach and Bill Hill, and they had raised $200 million from CalPERS. And they raised the money with the idea of planting vineyards and ultimately selling the vineyard land, once it was productive and once it had become more valuable. And so they wanted to hire, my first job there was assistant fund manager. And I just felt like I'd hit the jackpot. There aren't very many opportunities in the wine business to, especially at that time, to intersect with, what I considered high finance. And I felt like, oh man, what a great combination of industry and function. What a great opportunity. So that's what I did.
It was. And I remember because that's when you and I first met. Mm-hmm. You were working for PPV and I was too, doing legal work for them. And it was a really exciting, it felt like it was something really new and really special that was being created. And other people did, in fact, go on to continue to do similar ventures. Bill and Dick were sort of on the vanguard of that, really, wine investment funds.
Absolutely. And I really appreciated that we got to do so many deals. I mean, we were in deep on deals just all the time and talk about all the complexities of regulation and development and land use. I mean, I felt like you helped us navigate 77 flavors of what can go wrong on potential real estate acquisitions. And we all know that no two are alike. And so every time we had new deals coming up, there was new sets of questions and it was fun. It was a lot of creative thinking and problem solving. And it was so fun to have such a good partner in crime on that too.
They were really fun. It's interesting because some of those properties have gone on to be bought by other people who then became clients over the years. And it's always interesting when you have this store of knowledge from before, right? So someone says, oh, I'm thinking about buying this vineyard. And you're like, oh, I know all about that. And a lot of those PPV vineyard, properties were really great properties that are highly valued by their current owners. Well, then you joined GI Partners. So tell us how that came to happen.
So eventually, Bill and Dick were ready to exit the business, and CalPERS was still the investor in the vineyard properties. And CalPERS has a big and longtime real estate partner in GI Partners. And at the time, GI Partners owned Duckhorn Wine Company. So CalPERS called their friends at GI and said, hey, we have this vineyard portfolio. The two guys that are running it are phasing out, and we'd love for you to take this over for us because you know something about the wine business because you own Duckhorn. And at first, GI, this is absolutely not GI's business model normally. And so they didn't fit squarely into what they do. And so CalPERS suggested, by then I had developed a relationship with some of the people at CalPERS. And so CalPERS said to GI, you could call this woman and, she's a hard worker and trustworthy and she can help you figure this all out. So they did that. And then I, lo and behold, had a new job at GI and was continuing to stay with the properties.
And then remind me, did the acquisition of Far Niente come before the sale of Duckhorn or after? I've forgotten. What was the sequence?
At that time, we had transitioned into selling the properties mostly. And so again, we were confronted with 77 different things that come up when you sell vineyards. And so again, we were appreciating all the creative thinking and just complexities around real estate transactions in general. Far Niente. So Far Niente came up we got the non-disclosure agreement in August of 2015 and closed in June of 2016. And then GI sold Duckhorn in November of 2016. So just a few months after acquiring Far Niente, GI sold Duckhorn. Mm-hmm.
Wow, I'd forgotten that they were that close together. It was a lot of deal activity. So tell us a little bit about GI's decision to invest in Far Niente. What attracted you to it? I remember when you called to tell me you were going to do the deal and how exciting it was, but I'd love it if you'd share with our listeners what the thinking there was.
Absolutely. It was GI initially invested in Duckhorn because the founder of GI and some of the other partners knew a lot about the real estate industry, and they were close enough in proximity to wine country to be able to layer kind of an operating business and real estate expertise on top of each other and have success in a wine investment. So after they acquired Duckhorn and learned so much about the industry, they came to me when I showed up at GI and they said, hey, we might be interested in acquiring another one. We think there's potential in these investments. And so when Far Niente came up, we just absolutely knew right away that was the one that we were interested in. Fundamentally, what we're looking for are companies with latent demand, where there's the ability to sell into a market, really strong foundational brands that have the ability to grow. And for whatever reason, haven't grown beyond their full capacity yet. And then a great management team that's excited to help execute that growth. And so we had that combination.
You definitely are.
Yeah, we had that combination of things in Far Niente, and we just knew immediately, coupled with beautiful real estate, fantastic, high quality wines, and good, strong brands that had potential for growth.
And at that point, the real estate was the Far Niente winery in Oakville and the Nickel and Nickel winery, right? Was there anything else?
Well, in the portfolio, there are lots of vineyard properties. Hang on one second.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to tell you exactly how many?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us.
All right, hold on. I have to look. Don't put that part in.
We will. We'll edit it
Pull
out.
it up.
We'll redo this. I'll say it again.
Hold on one second. Hold on. Give me a second. I have to count them. There's like 13. Hold on. I'm getting to the page. Oh, it doesn't have it. Okay, give me one more second. Hold on. There you go.
That's fine. I'll have another sip of my wine. I was in a hurry and I couldn't be bothered to go to the cupboard where the wine glasses are and move things around to get to a wine glass. So I figured you were the only one who was going to see me, so it was okay.
It's okay. I'll forgive you. Okay, hold on. Here it is. Yeah. Okay, here it comes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 owned, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 leased. I don't think I need to say that. I'll say 12 owned with 440 planted acres. Okay, go ahead.
So when you bought Far Niente, the real estate at that point was the Far Niente winery, the iconic winery in Oakville, and the Nickel and Nickel winery on Highway 29. What else was there?
Great. Good question. We have, in addition to that, there were several vineyards. So today we have 12 vineyards, but 4 of those we have added since the GI investment. So at the time, to answer your question, at the time GI invested in Far Niente, there were the 2 iconic wine estates plus 8 planted vineyards.
It's amazing. What's the total acreage that's planted?
Today it's 440.
It's amazing. All in Napa, right?
There are approximately 100 of those are in Sonoma. We have 3 vineyard properties in Sonoma that produce Pinot Noir for our EnRoute brand, and those properties are located in the Russian River Valley.
Well, that's a good transition to asking you about the portfolio of brands, because you just mentioned EnRoute. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the different brands under the Far Niente umbrella?
Yes, absolutely. This is another one. When we invested in Far Niente, there were 5 brands. Today there are 6. The 5 brands are each sort of, what I like to say is they're each kind of a rifle shot. They're each their own thing, and no one of the brands does more than it's intended to do. So Far Niente is Cabernet and Chardonnay from Oakville. It's the pinnacle of the pyramid for us. It's high end, no expense spared on quality, and really intends, and no expense spared as well on our hospitality experience and on our facilities. It's a high end experience. It's absolute luxury. Nickel and Nickel is our single vineyard wine brand, and that is all it is. We make 20 different, depending on the vintage, up to 20 different single vineyard wines, primarily Cabernet. We also make Chardonnay. Some vintages we make Merlot and Syrah, Merlot or Syrah, but no matter what we make, it's always single vineyard wines. EnRoute, like we mentioned, is a Pinot Noir brand that's based in the Russian River, and they have, and under the EnRoute umbrella, we make a Pinot and a Chardonnay. And then we make a series of single vineyard Pinots, which are absolutely fabulous, and the quality, just huge bang for the buck on quality, in my humble opinion. At Bella Union, we make a Napa Valley Cabernet that's Rutherford based, and we'll talk a little bit more about that winery because we have exciting things to come from it. But we have a few other products, or a few other wines that we make under the Bella Union umbrella. And then at Post and Beam, that's our newest brand. We do a Cabernet. We also make a Chardonnay from Post and Beam, just a little bit of it. And that's $50. That's a Napa Valley wine. And that's our newest lineup. That's the brand that has been introduced since the GI investment. And then last but not least, we have Dolce, which is our ultra luxurious, fabulous dessert wine.
Yes, it is fabulous. I love Dolce. And I love the fact, too, that you keep that rather than having all of the different wines under one label or a main label and a secondary label, you created standalone brands that really have their own energy and their own place in the market. And I think it's what you said, nothing tried to do too much, which is a really important lesson in the wine industry. I think people often do try to do too much with the brand. And this was a way of keeping your brands distinct, recognizable, and keeping your brand loyalty to the core, and then having the ability to branch out to the other brands if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. It's really tempting. I mean, as someone who does think about growth a lot, you think about the different ways that you can get growth. And, just thinking about something like Post and Beam, introducing a new brand that has absolutely zero brand recognition is tricky, right? It would have been much easier to just introduce a low-cost Far Niente or a low-cost Nickel and Nickel or something. But we really didn't want to do that because it isn't Nickel and Nickel. It's not Far Niente. It's something different. And it has its own winemaker. It has its own vineyard sourcing. It's its own thing. And, we feel like that's more authentic for who we are. And it also... And, our customers and our distributor partners can tell, that it's its own thing, and it's got its own identity. And even though it's the lowest priced Cabernet in our portfolio, $50 is still a lot of money for a bottle of wine. It's still a luxurious bottle of wine that you can feel proud of, taking to your friend's house.
Well, and I think for Post and Beam, you now have the model of what you did with Bella Union, which is really a segue to what I want to talk about next, which is you had the Bella Union brand in the portfolio, but it was, an orphan is maybe too strong a word, but it didn't really have a home of its own, and it didn't really have an identity of its own particularly. So tell us about the history of Bella Union and then what happened next.
Yep, absolutely. So in 2012, so far before I was ever in the picture, the management team found a spectacular piece of ground available, and they were able to secure a long-term lease for the ground so that they could farm it to their exacting standards and get exactly the grapes that they wanted from it. It was on Bella Oaks Lane in Rutherford, and that became the home of Bella Union. While there was a little teeny tiny production facility there, we very quickly outgrew it. Like you said, before long, we found ourselves, not exactly orphaned and not exactly homeless, but maybe a little of both, and said, we need to find proper home for it. Bella Union's becoming a real brand and a real winery, and it needs its own proper place unto itself. And so the winery that we bought is in Rutherford, right on Highway 29. We like to call it underdeveloped asset. We think it has a lot of opportunity. It's not a particularly beautiful building in its current form, but that gave us a little bit of a blank slate to be able to create something great. So in November of 2021, we were fortunate to acquire this facility. We happen to own the vineyard right next door. So we have now 120 or 130 linear feet of highway frontage on Highway 29. It's right western side of the highway, almost up to the hills. And the property had been available for a few years. We'd been trying to buy it. And so we were finally successful. We closed in November of 2021. And Kay, you know that the process to get it done, there was so much going on at the time. And so I just relied very heavily on you and your team to take us over the finish line and to buy this piece of property for us. And even before we closed, we turned our attention to getting a use permit application into the county and to making sure that if we were going to buy this, that we were going to hit the ground running and we were going to move quickly. And yeah, sure enough, we have been successful on all fronts so far, and we're gearing up to start construction here in a matter of weeks.
It was a really fun process, I have to say. I mean, we filed that use permit in January, the modification to the application, and it went to hearing in December. And you had a really great team at Far Niente who knew exactly, it was very impressive to me. They knew exactly what they wanted, what facilities they wanted, what type of hospitality experience they wanted. And they really put a lot of attention to detail in the planning of that winery. And they had the flexibility to do so because it's a big building and they're going to have a lot of room for really cool things that wineries sometimes don't. Sometimes the hospitality facilities get kind of shoehorned into an existing building and there isn't really room to expand. And that's not the case here. I think, your team and the architect really came up with something special. And when it went to hearing, we heard that back from the planning commissioners, right? How excited they were about it and how excited they felt the community would be. So when is it going to be open to the public? And tell us a little bit about what it's going to be like, what the vibe will be.
Good question. So before we even go there, I just want to reiterate and echo your sentiments that we had between our great architect who's so creative and not a winery guy. He's a hospitality hotel guy that's just creative and flexible and thoughtful. And then we have a superstar operator who's a restaurant winery person on our team who could, like you said, make quick decisions. And a killer project manager who's a recovering civil engineer. And then with your expertise and ability to navigate, I think we ended up with a project that I just can't be more excited about. I think we got on record. It must have been the fastest application submittal after acquisition. It took us 2 months to finalize the application, get it submitted. And then absolutely must be the fastest approval from submittal of the application. I mean, to get a permit like that in under a year, I think is something we can feel proud of. So
it was pretty darn fast.
And you said we could do it and I wasn't sure, but you were right. We are planning to open in the spring of 2024. The winery will be able to host lots of different types of guests, which we're looking forward to. We can have walk-ins, we can have walk-in visitors, we can have picnics, we can host different kinds of events. And then, of course, there's a big educational component to what we do. And so guests that want to come in and dive deep into the blending process and how the wines are made will have that opportunity as well. The way the tasting room sets up, there's different areas for different types of people that come in, including our wine club members. They'll have dedicated space. So if they just want to drop in and have a glass of wine, they'll be invited to do that. And then if, like I said, if big groups want to come in and have fun, there's space for that. Or if they want to come in and be serious and learn, our team will be available to do that. And there will be the space allocated for that type of process as well. Our hope is that the property is fun, the experience is fun, and we would like to create something that's different from what we have at Far Niente and at Nickel and Nickel. But at the same time, our Far Niente customer or our Nickel and Nickel customer could go to Bella Union and wouldn't be offended by what we're doing there. It would be the same high quality standards that they would expect from us, but executed in maybe a more youthful, kind of more fun, very cool way.
I think it would be impossible to be offended because it's going to be so beautiful. I mean, when I saw the mood boards that the architect put together with the sort of 21st century take on an Art Nouveau brasserie I can't imagine anything better as a place to hang out for the day, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you. We certainly have high expectations and we're optimistic that it's all going to come together and it's going to be absolutely beautiful and fun, and that we'll continue producing A+ wines that are worth a visit.
And now I'm going to ask you the question that you can't answer, which is, what winery are you going to buy next?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll email you my list.
Okay.
I can't tell you. I can't tell it to you. It has to be attorney-client privilege on that one.
That's right. Well, we'll do another podcast after your next acquisition.
Sounds like a plan.
Well, that's it for today. I'm Catherine Philippakis with my guest, Dana Sexton Vivier, and you've been listening to Uncorked by the Wine Industry Group of Farella, Braun and Martel. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like us to discuss, please send an email to uncorked@fbm.com. That's uncorked@fbm.com. And now it's time to put a cork in it.